My name is Debbie Lee Flores. I am a mom, a wife, a communications expert, and I'm also a patient with quite a few diagnoses that I've had to manage through my life. As a patient, I have Crohn's disease, PCOS, spondylitis, and psoriasis that I manage on a day-to-day basis. And I've also got family members that have several autoimmune conditions that I have had to help over the years to manage their conditions and interact with medical professionals as well. The important thing to understand is, as a patient, is what it's like to be a patient in need. A lot of people don't necessarily have that understanding. So what's it like to walk in my shoes or the shoes of a person who has to navigate the world with a chronic illness? It's important to note that not all doctors always understand your conditions. So a doctor's job is to partner with you to help you create a plan for your care. Your job is to present your symptoms, how long you've had symptoms, what makes them worse or better, and the doctor helps you to provide solutions. Your doctor may not know what your insurance plans cover. They may not know if any payment assistance plans are available to help you with medication costs. The bottom line is your doctor doesn't know everything. So you, as the patient or a caregiver, are going to have to take a little responsibility for research and planning to make sure that you get the care that you need as well. There are a few things you'll want to know in order to start a healthy dialogue with your care team. First thing that's going to be super important is making sure that you provide them with a detailed medical history of your conditions and the care you've received to that point. If you're going to a new doctor, you might consider having previous records sent over ahead of time or getting a copy of them. Some medical establishments have a database that gives you access to your records and makes sharing with other providers super easy. But it doesn't eliminate your responsibility as a patient to review and ensure that the details are accurate by just being honest with your doctors. And making sure that you provide them as much information as they need in order to give you complete care. Another really helpful thing is to keep a symptom diary. You can keep a written journal or use apps like Simple to track your symptoms. You'll want to be as detailed as possible when you're tracking symptoms. I don't personally endorse any particular app. I don't do that. My method actually is sometimes because my doctors have like an app that I can message them in. If I have a particular experience, I just tend to send a note to my doctor right away before I forget about it. But if you're keeping track of those things, it is important to check out a few different diaries and tools to find out what works for you. Every person is different. We want to make sure that you have a tool that you can use effectively for yourself. A couple of examples for you just to know what a good symptom tracking log entry looks like versus one that's not so great is instead of putting something in my diary like my stomach was hurting in the afternoon, so I took some medicine and it helped, I might put something in there like I had pain at 2 o'clock in my lower right abdomen. It felt like pressure, not quite as sharp. I would rate it a 7 out of 10. It lasted about an hour. I used the heat pack and took 2 extra strength Tylenol for the pain, and it became dull. So you'll notice the difference there is a little bit of vagueness that's not really going to help your provider to figure out what's going on versus giving a detailed location of the pain, how intense your pain was, and what kind of pain it was, and what you did, what was helpful and what wasn't. Another thing that might be helpful, especially if you have an autoimmune condition, is keeping a food and exercise diary. Same kind of idea here. You want to be as detailed as possible. One of my entries in my food log that I keep, because I do have Crohn's disease, would be breakfast, 2 eggs scrambled with a ½ cup of spinach, 1 slice of Nature's Own wheat toast, 2 slices of cooked ham. Why am I that detailed? Again, because there might be something in there that can point to a clue if a doctor's looking at it to try and figure out why I'm experiencing a symptom. Not so great example again would be ham, eggs, and toast for breakfast. It's just important to give detail. And another really important piece of the puzzle here is having a doctor who cares. Now, hold on. I know that all of us don't have access to that all the time, but there are things that you can do. So while you do need a specialist, nothing is going to replace a doctor that just cares about you and engages with you. Even if a doctor doesn't have that right specialty, a lot can be said for a doctor who's willing to go the extra mile to help you figure things out. And you are not tied to any one provider. If you don't feel cared for, you can get up and leave. You can go to a different doctor. And lastly, and most importantly, is your voice. Nothing will ever replace you when it comes to your care. If you feel like a doctor's overlooking your symptoms or not taking you seriously, speak up and speak out. No doctor knows everything. They go to medical school, but you live in your body, and you are the best person to share and speak on what you are experiencing. All of these things are really important that we've talked about so far, but sometimes a lot of this gets thrown out of the window when you have a medical emergency and need to go to the emergency room. One really great thing will be if you can have an advocate. If you're in too much pain to talk about your symptoms, nothing will beat you having somebody with you that can speak on your behalf. They don't have to know everything, but here are a couple things you want to make sure that they do know. First is what pain or problem you need to be seen for. Next is the severity of your problem or pain. Then is the onset of your pain and the level of your pain. So that's essentially about what time your pain began and what you would rate it from a 1 to a 10. A side note here, it is not helpful at all to a doctor, and they will not take you more seriously if you tell them it's 11 out of 10. Try to use the scale and stick to it. That's what they're going to go by. 10 being the worst possible pain you've ever experienced in your life, and 1 being, I could deal with this. So just keep that in mind. Telling a doctor, oh my God, I'm at an 11, is not going to help them to be able to assist you any better. And then, of course, you want to make sure that the person that's going with you knows about any pre-existing conditions. Again, they don't need to know every single detail, but they need to know what you had, what other conditions you have that may complicate the situation you're in right now. Another point here is when you last took medications and which ones. You'll hear this a lot in examples when parents go to the emergency room with children. I have definitely been in that situation with my own son, where it's like, oh yeah, he had medicine. I'm not sure when he had it, because as a parent, right, like now I'm the advocate. I'm so concerned about my son. He's throwing up or whatever the situation may be. I'm so concerned about him that maybe I didn't take notes and keep up with that. But do your best to keep notes if you have to go to the emergency room, and if somebody else is going to be taking that on, make sure they have that information. What medications you took, what time you took them. Any known allergies to medications specifically. So it's not quite as important maybe for your doctor to know that you have seasonal allergies, but it is important for them to know if you have a reaction to a specific medication that might be part of the treatment. So just make sure whoever's speaking on your behalf knows that information. And lastly, your primary care doctor's information. I am fortunate that my doctors are all kind of in the same place. So I just say, hey, it's this clinic, and everybody knows who I'm talking about in my area. But not everybody sees big groups like that. So make sure that you have your doctor's contact information, save it in your phone, and make sure anybody has it that needs to have it. All that being said, there are times when you're not going to have the opportunity to have somebody available to go to the emergency room with you. I've been there so many times myself as a patient. We are living in a state where we don't have family right now, and so it's just my husband and myself, and somebody's got to stay home with the kid. So if I need to go to the emergency room, I am oftentimes going on my own. What's important is that I write these things down ahead of time, or I ask my husband, hey, can you write this down? Or even, you can even take a voice note while you're feeling halfway decent, maybe on the way there. Take a voice note in your phone, because you don't know if you're going to be incapacitated at some point and not able to share it later. So having stuff written down is definitely going to be helpful for you as you head to the emergency room. Next seems pretty simple, but be kind. When you're in pain, it is so easy to take it out on other people. But chances are those doctors in the emergency room and the nurses have dealt with 1,000 cranky patients before you, and they're stretched pretty thin as it is. I've had too many emergency room visits to count, and what I've noticed is that when I try to be kind even when I'm in pain, the reaction that I get from people is 10 times better. I give them as much information as I can. I try to be as patient as I can, and I also say thank you to every single person that I interact with. Believe it or not, a few seconds of acknowledgement goes a long way. And lastly, regarding pain medication. Unfortunately, in the world of chronic illness, chronic pain tends to be a piece of the puzzle. One thing that I do to make sure that doctors are taking me seriously when I'm in an emergency room is, if at all possible, if I'm able to hold off on getting pain medication, it looks a lot better if I tell them, I verbally say, I'd like to wait until we know what's going on before you medicate me for pain. I specifically use that vernacular because a lot of times when you deal with chronic illness, they tend to put you in this bucket of, oh, this person may be seeking medication. And that's a problem. We are in an opioid epidemic in this country, and it's a concern that we have to think about. So if at all possible, it won't be possible in every situation. And if you're in pain and you're offered pain medications and you feel like it's going to help you so that you can handle the situation a little bit better and be able to speak to your pain, go ahead, take it. But if you're at all able to wait, it does help for me. And a lot of times they'll see me in pain and they will offer again. And if they offer a second time, a third time, I usually accept. It's just that initial time of saying, you know what, if we can hold off, if there's any way that you can figure out what's wrong first, can we do that? It just puts a different light on there, and there's less likely to label me as a person seeking medication or painkillers than if I was just to say, yeah, sure, please give me pain medication. I need help right now. What if I can't afford help? Not everybody in this country has access to great medical care, and not all of us have great insurance. In fact, a lot of us deal with insurances that have pretty high deductibles, and the thought of going to an emergency room or going to a doctor's office or a clinic can kind of just terrify you when it comes to thinking about your financial implication at the end of the day. Here are a couple of things that have helped me along the way when it comes to absolutely needing care and not being able to wait. The first thing I would say is I often choose to work with a large hospital network. Why? Large hospital networks often receive grants and financial gifts to pay for patients who don't have the means to pay for themselves. It's usually not the case with smaller hospitals. So I tend to go to the large hospital network first. Usually ones that are attached to universities tend to offer services like that more readily. So that would be my first step for those of us who might not have access to funds to pay for care. The next thing is there are a lot of programs available to help with medication costs. Yes, there are downsides to these programs, but when you need your medication in order to stay alive, it's much better to have it and to rely on a program like this if you absolutely need it. There's payment assistance programs. Major drug companies often offer financial assistance to help cover some or all of the cost of specific drugs. There are prescription discount programs that can offer you. A couple of the ones I know off the top of my head, again, not necessarily endorsing any particular one, but programs like GoodRx or WellRx or Single Care offer discounts on medications. And pharmacies even will offer a discount if you opt to go with a generic medication. I will tell you, because sometimes there is concern if your doctor tells you you should take Toradol and you go home and your prescription does not say Toradol on it, you might say, oh my gosh, this is something like, this is not the same medication. If it's a generic, it is quite literally the same exact medication. It's just a less expensive version that insurances are more likely to cover. But aside from that, they tend to be significantly less expensive, which will help you. The next topic to tackle here is discrimination. None of us like to talk about discrimination, but it's something, unfortunately, that a lot of us deal with when we're trying to access care. Discrimination for medical reasons, because of the color of your skin, because of your religion, background, sexual orientation. These are things that we have to deal with. And while we'd love to live in a world that this is not a problem, I would rather prepare you for the situation so you know how to handle it the right way. The most important thing to do when you encounter discrimination is to speak up. When you identify that someone is discriminating against you, ask why and be direct. You can be direct and assertive without being aggressive, and that's really important to think about as well. Avoid the temptation to fly off the handle or yell at somebody. Instead, use a direct phrase that speaks specifically about the kind of discrimination that you're dealing with. Here's one that I've used recently, actually, in a time when I was dealing with discrimination. Can you provide me with a reason, other than the color of my skin or my last name, why you provided this patient with adequate postoperative pain medication, but I am not eligible for the same standard post-op pain meds? Another example that I've used as well is, I would prefer to speak with a doctor that doesn't belittle me based on the details of my medical history. Is there somebody else I can speak with? Another important thing to do is to report it. We have a tendency to leave things alone once we got the desired result out of the interaction. But if a doctor or medical professional has discriminated against you in any way, they're probably doing it to other people as well. Once you've gotten your care, make it a point to contact the administration of the hospital or office and file a formal complaint. Depending on the interaction itself, you may also want to consider whether or not you want to report beyond their administration to the medical board in your state. The only advice that I would give is don't stay quiet. Speak until you've been heard and make a change for all the patients that come after you. Lastly, be respected. You deserve to see doctors that can respect you and care for you without placing judgment on your lifestyle, diagnosis, or the color of your skin. If you don't feel confident that this provider's office will ever be able to respect you based on your history with them, you can and should seek out other specialists. You deserve quality care.